Today's edition of the Three Martini Lunch is brought to you in part by Omaha Steaks. Just a little over a week ago, you may remember, of course, that we honored our moms, and rightly so. They deserve the great day and praise and adulation all year round. And next month, it's time to honor our dads. That's right, Father's Day is right around the corner, and while Dad might like the crazy tie, what he really wants is a world-class steak, and that's where Omaha Steaks can come through for you. Give him a meal that day that he will remember. And right now, Omaha Steaks has hand-selected gift packages starting at just $89. Use the code Martini at checkout for an additional discount when you shop gourmet gift packages for Father's Day at omahasteaks.com. You can pick from meats like the juicy boneless pork chops, the air-chilled chicken, and of course, the legendary beefy Omaha Steaks burgers, in addition to the steaks themselves. No one matches the flavor or the tenderness or value of Omaha Steaks. This year, show Dad the love with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com and shop the gourmet gift packages for Father's Day and get additional savings when you use the promo code Martini. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code Martini, omahasteaks.com.
Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad to have you with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. And Jim, let's start with the good. We haven't talked a lot about the Trump trial in New York City. Alvin Bragg, the far-left prosecutor, putting Trump on trial for a misdemeanor, essentially, that the statute of limitations ran out on. So he's kind of twisting it into a felony charge on campaign finance issues. It all goes back to the payments to Stormy Daniels to keep her from talking before the 2016 election, allegedly. And so the trial has gone on for a while. If you have been paying attention, and if you haven't, I would certainly recommend the writings of Andy McCarthy, who subs for Jim from time to time. He's providing analysis on this for Fox as well. He thinks the whole thing is pretty much a partisan scam. I don't know if he thinks it's a witch hunt. I don't know if he's used that term, but he's dubious about the whole prosecution here. Nonetheless, it has gone forward. The judge seems to not be a fan of the former president in a number of his rulings. We talked a while ago about him at the time considering making Trump show up in court on the day of Barron's high school graduation, which was this past Friday. Trump did get to go, so that all got resolved. The defense is now rested in this case. They did not call a ton of witnesses. In fact, yesterday, the prosecution wrapped up its case before the defense called its two witnesses. The last witness for the prosecution was Michael Cohen, who was, Trump's right-hand man and fixer for many years during the 2016 campaign. He was on TV a lot, defending Trump at every twist and turn. And then when things started to go south legally, he turned on Trump, spent time in prison. But he's the star witness here for Trump allegedly knowing and directing Cohen about how to pay Stormy Daniels to hush up before the election. But Cohen has been caught having to admit a number of lies over the years, which is certainly not helping his credibility. And then yesterday, Cohen admitted during the defense cross-examination that the Trump organization paid him $50,000 for certain services at the time, but Cohen says he only paid $20,000 of that to the actual vendor known as Redfinch, a tech company hired to rig online polls in favor of Trump. And then Cohen pocketed the remaining $30,000 because he thought he deserved a bigger bonus. So not exactly the most stellar, unimpeachable witness the prosecution could come up with. The Trump legal team then just called a couple of people, including this guy, Robert Costello, who specifically said that Cohen told him that Trump didn't know anything about all of this stuff. So we're going to get closing arguments next week. Then it's going to go to a jury. It's New York City. So even if you think that the prosecution case has fallen apart, I wouldn't be shocked by a guilty verdict here. But Jim, what do you make of this whole Cohen saga?
Yeah, look, before we go any further, neither you nor I are really making any predictions about the verdict. I think as you just mentioned that New York City jury, it's entirely possible you get every juror saying, oh, he's Trump, I hate that guy, string him up. And it's entirely possible you could get a hung jury. You could get one person on that jury who sees, Trump is really getting railroaded here. And I'm going to say, you just don't know what's going on in the minds of the jurors. But in a world where a lot of times we've seen Trump's lawyers not bring their A game, misfiling deadlines, not bring up stuff, misfile things and things like that. This is one case where Trump's lawyers knew the assignment and did the assignment really well. They tore Michael Cohen to shreds. Also worth noting, the other kind of quote-unquote star witness, the porn star witness, Stormy Daniels, her testimony was tawdry as all hell. I am sure it is embarrassing to the president. I am sure he feels really embarrassed and humiliated. But she didn't really offer much light on the alleged crime at issue here. That wasn't really what she knew about. So, there's a question of did that, we get the PR hit, but did it actually do much in the minds of the jury to convince them that Trump had committed a crime, falsifying business records, in order to commit a felony of hiding expenditures from the FEC? And then just, Michael Cohen, look, he's a guy who left a trail of slime everywhere he went back when he worked for Trump, and he is still the same guy who leaves a trail of slime everywhere he goes. He's already been committed perjury and been convicted of that. He's a known guy who you can trust him about as far as you can throw him. Also, apparently, he does a video podcast, and Greg, there's nobody worse than people who like that. But apparently on them, he talks about how much he hates Trump and how he's determined to see Trump in handcuffs, and he froths at the mouth. And as a result of that certainly doesn't seem like a guy who's objective, and he certainly adds to the perception. This is a guy who'd be willing to lie under oath in order to get back at his former boss. So you add all this up. Michael Cohen is the ultimate low credibility witness, and he, got tore apart on there, admitting that he was stealing. So the guy who's telling you about this terrible crime that Trump committed, that he's supposed to go to jail. Oh, by the way, I stole from him. That's kind of like that. You're supposed to, and on this guy's word, you're supposed to convict Trump. Now, again, I don't know what's going to happen, but if it's an acquittal or a hung jury, I think Bragg always was going a bridge too far. He always was, when this case was first announced, those ardent Trump defenders like David Frum and David French looked at this and said, wow, this is a stretch. This is really twisting the law in ways it's never been expressed before. So from the very beginning, I was like, this does not sound like something that's likely to be, certainly wasn't the most serious threat to Trump. And the other ones are not certain to go to trial before, or certainly not likely to be resolved before Election Day. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it is a good martini that for once Trump's lawyers stepped up to the plate and they hit it out of the park against a very flawed prosecution witness, let's emphasize.
Yes, the piñata of the prosecution's case, easily attackable. And so, again, we'll see what happens here. But they definitely poked holes in the most vulnerable witness and the most critical witness in this case. Some people have said that the prosecution's case has unfolded so badly that they're not even sure that the underlying event happened with Stormy Daniels. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure I'd go that far. But again, that's not the issue at trial here. All right, Jim, let's talk about our great new sponsor that we first introduced yesterday, and that is Lumen. Lumen is a great way to take care of your metabolic health and keep track of where you stand. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates into a whole bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep.
One of the things that's always a hurdle when you're trying new things is, well, is it complicated? Is it hard to use? Can you breathe? That's literally all you have to do once you set up the app, which is also not hard. Just breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism. Are you burning mostly fats or carbs? And then it gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me and use 3ml as the code to get $100 off your Lumen. That's lumen.me and use 3ml at checkout for $100 off. Again, that's lumen.me, code 3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini, often sponsored by the Middle East, but in this case, certainly is the focal point again. And for so long now, over the past few months, basically as soon as Hamas was done slaughtering Israelis and other folks in Israel on October 7th, and the Israeli response started to ramp up. The rest of the world was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Both sides just need to cool off at this point. And so as the Israeli military operation ramped up, you had more and more people, and eventually the Biden administration saying, there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. People are starving. Civilians are being killed because they're being used as human shields. But all these kids and women are suffering, and the Israelis aren't doing their job, and we need to do more. And now we're going to build this pier, which is effectively up and running now. But as you point out so well, Jim, in the Jolt, as we suspected, it's not our fault, and it's not the Israelis' fault that people are suffering. This is what it says. Aid deliveries began arriving at a U.S.-built pier on Friday as Israel comes under growing global pressure to allow more supplies into the besieged coastal enclave. The UN agreed to assist in coordinating aid distribution from the floating pier, but has remained adamant that deliveries by land are the best way to combat the crisis. The UN said that 10 truckloads of food aid transported from the pier by UN contractors were received on Friday at a World Food Program warehouse at a site in Gaza. But on Saturday, only 5 truckloads made it to the warehouse after 11 others were cleaned out by Palestinians during the journey through an area that a UN official has said has been hard to access with humanitarian aid. Quote, they've not seen trucks for a while. They just basically mounted on the trucks and helped themselves to some of the food parcels. The UN did not receive any aid from the pier on Sunday or Monday. Quote, we need to make sure that the necessary security and logistical arrangements are in place before we proceed, said the UN official. And by the way, I think we're partnering with UNRWA here. So, Jim, this is obviously not a shock to anyone who has the faintest clue of reality in the region, but what do you make of this basically becoming common knowledge now?
I suppose we could begin by saying the good news is that as of this recording, the pier has not been bombed. And it's been in operation for a couple of days now. Hamas has said it would treat it as enemy activity. So there's always a chance that artillery shells come in at a given point. But so far, that hasn't happened. That Reuters report attributes it to an unnamed UN official, but Stefan Dujarric, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly, a spokesman for the UN Secretary General, he said the same thing. So we have on-the-record sources. And Al Jazeera has footage of it, and you can see it. And watching it today, this morning, Greg, it reminded me of the images we saw of the desperate Afghans at Bagram Airport trying to get out of the country. Different circumstances, but that same mass of people, that desperation, people climbing and doing everything they possibly could. And you feel bad for these people, but also a lot of, military age men leading the charge, getting that information, getting those crates of food out of there, running away like looters during the Rodney King riots or whatever, Katrina, whatever looting is in, images are in your head. Now, look, maybe some of those people are genuinely hungry and that's why they're doing it. I would point out, though, this means that the fact that they're grabbing the food means it can't get to the World Food Program warehouse and get distributed to everybody else. It's just luck of the draw. Whoever is biggest and strongest gets there and gets to the food first. So maybe those people are the ones who need it. Maybe some of those people are just the biggest and strongest and are taking the most food. And there's it is not unreasonable to believe that some of those people grabbing the food are Hamas, because there have been multiple allegations of Hamas, not just stealing food, but in fact killing aid workers, taking the food so that they control the monopoly on the food and that, they can take food that was donated, give it away for free, and it was designed to get into the mouths of desperate, hungry people and selling it to other people for money. And that's, I suspect, when all is said and done, we're probably going to find some of this. So, the U.S. taxpayers have spent something in the neighborhood of $320 million to build this pier. And it's the food's not getting to the people it needs to get to. And we might be helping Hamas through this. So every part that the U.S. handled correctly, the U.S. was responsible. The U.S. was look, we are going to build the pier. We're going to get there. And after that, UN, it's up to you. And last Thursday, every Biden administration official from the Pentagon to U.S. Agency for National Development was like, don't worry, the UN has got this. We are working with the humanitarian community. Greg, I don't think the humanitarian community carries guns. And I think in these circumstances, they have to. They are easy pickings. You feel for these truck drivers. They don't have any good options. There are people literally climbing over, blocking the road, getting onto the truck and just taking everything away. They need armed escorts, which I suspect is why we haven't seen any deliveries for the past 2 days. No, in these press briefings, the Biden administration officials talked about how they had great cooperation from UN officials, great cooperation from the Israelis. No mention of cooperation from the Palestinians. And if you don't get the Palestinians to buy into this, you're going to run into problems you probably can't handle. That's where we are. We'll see if they come up with any solution. I imagine eventually they're going to need you blue helmet types to run around escorting these trucks. By the way, it's an 8-mile drive from the pier to the warehouse. Now, I know the roads in Gaza are not great. Apparently, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to do that. But even that small stretch cannot be secured by the UN personnel on the ground, which I think is really revealing about the situation in Gaza right now.
Yeah, so they clearly need more. And then the question is, who's going to provide the most competent security? Those boots that touch the pier but don't touch Gaza going to end up touching the actual ground there. That would be a major advancement from what Biden has promised, and I don't think it's going to go very well if they expect U.S. troops to be providing that security. So, I mean, it's a complicated situation, and it's always us and the Israelis that get demonized for people who need food not getting it in this situation. But the reality on the ground is that it's not getting where it needs to go because of nefarious elements there and just people who are desperate. But it's not getting to the people who need it most. All right, let's talk about another fantastic sponsor, and that is ZBiotics. Look, it's nice to go out with friends, and sometimes you want to have a drink or two, and sometimes that turns into even more, and you wake up feeling lousy the next day. What if there was a way to feel fresh after a night of responsible drinking? Because there is now, and it's called ZBiotics. It's the pre-alcohol probiotic drink, and it's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic.
Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next morning. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Again, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next morning.
Just talked to my colleague this morning who has tried the ZBiotics, and I've mentioned several times on the podcast. Absolutely loves it. Has always drunk responsibly. As he got older, a little bit rougher the next morning. ZBiotics made the next morning perfectly fine. So go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And we've had more than a few martinis documenting Joe Biden's frailty, physically, mentally, and all across the board in many different categories. Yesterday, no exception, especially after having to have his staff correct a number of malapropisms at his NAACP speech in Michigan over the weekend. This time, he was talking about the crisis in the Middle East and Americans being held in Israel. And he was about to make a very special introduction until his mind finally caught on.
My administration is working around the clock to free the remaining hostages, just as we have freed hostages already. And here with us today is Hirsch Goldberg Poland, and he is not here with us, but he's still being held by Hamas.
Oh, he's here with us, but that's right. He's still being held by Hamas. So, Jim, as we've said, he's almost 82. Things aren't getting better. We've got the whole Robert Hirsch situation now where he's using executive privilege, so we can't hear what he actually said. We've got the transcript, which is bad enough, but there's certainly a reason why they don't want us to hear how the conversation actually unfolded. This is a guy who's making Americans more and more and more uneasy.
So, remember a couple years ago, then Vice President Biden was at some event and he wanted to pay tribute to somebody in the audience named Chuck. And he said, Chuck's here. Stand up, Chuck. And Chuck was paralyzed and was in a wheelchair. And it took a moment for the president to recognize this and to understand why Chuck was not standing. We can kind of laugh about that, even if you thought Biden was kind of batty and a weirdo and, malarkey! Back in his vice presidential days, I don't think people necessarily would have said Biden was senile or that he was losing it. First of all, again, in every audio clip we play on this podcast, my first reaction when I hear that is, God, the president's mumbling. He says, there's no strength in that voice. There's no It's barely above a whisper. It's kind of mumbly. It just, like he doesn't speak the way he used to. This is not a stutter. This is just a matter of the fact that he just does not seem to have the energy vocally or physically that he used to. And it's not good. Since the announcement of the debates, and I still hold to my position that I think Trump got the short end of the stick in this. I think that we're going to have the debate in late June. They're going to have the debate in September. And then Trump will want to do more debates because I think that Trump, again, if he gives Biden time to talk, Biden will hurt himself. Biden will get himself in trouble. If Trump tries to talk over him, then it'll probably just be a rerun of the first debate with Chris Wallace. But I think Trump will want to do more, and Biden will say, we did 2 in 2020. We did 2 this year. We're fine. But June is really early for a presidential debate in a general election. And I'm starting to wonder, is this sort of for the Democrats, the last chance to pull that ejector seat is if he does really badly there. It's before the Democratic convention. It's a dress rehearsal. And if Biden goes out there and he sounds fine and he doesn't sound too old, he sounds energetic, okay, fine. He remains the nominee and everything seems fine. If he goes out there and I'm going to say slips on a banana peel. There are other slightly more off-color metaphors that were kind of in my head right there. I don't know. You look at stuff like that, and if Biden is referring to hostages in Gaza as being in the audience, and the time he referred to, was it Jackie Walorski, the Republican member of Congress from Indiana who had passed away like 2 months earlier, and he said, where is she? He just comes across as a guy who's just not with it anymore. That he's kind of walking around in a fog. And I think if he does that on a national television screen with tens of millions of Americans watching, it's good. The Democrats will then say, we can't do this anymore. Now, I don't know if that means they go Kamala Harris. I don't know if that means they go Gavin Newsom or somebody else. But I do think that is the last moment, pull the ejector seat. We have to make a change moment. And I'm starting to come around to the idea that this was not necessarily an accidental scheduling to have one debate before the Democratic convention when the Democrats would have at least the process to change nominees if they deemed Biden just utterly unacceptable.
Yes, pulling the ejector seat in order to potentially nominate the vice president, who's even less popular. So your options are galore, Democrats.
We call that pulling a goose for Top Gun fans out there.
Well, we at least hope that he would live through the ejection.
Well, no, I was thinking that they pulling the ejection is like the Democratic Party would feel like they'd banged their head on a.
Yes. Good luck, everybody. This is what we're looking at heading into
Democrats.
The summer convention
you have nobody
season.
to blame but yourselves. You asked for this. You could have had Dean Phillips. Dean Phillips is a healthy man, and he seems sane a lot of the time, very often.
83-year-old Bernie Sanders will be over there going, I'm still here.
I know they shouldn't have gone with the rookie.
Oh, man, that could be a fun convention if there's just an absolute political brawl, like not a physical brawl, although that would probably happen too.
That's outside.
That's outside with the protesters. Oh, man. If he botches that debate, Chicago's going to be a blast. Anyway, have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Tuesday, and please join us on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.